In July of 1896, two Indigenous men, nicknamed Skookum Jim and Tagus Charlie, met his sister Kate and her husband George at the mouth of the Klondike River. They traveled up a tributary called Rabbit Creek, which later was renamed Bonanza Creek. One of them found the largest nugget of gold that sparked the Klondike Gold Rush. They worked their claim through the next winter before the stampede of over 100,000 prospectors between the years of 1896 and 1899 arrived. As a child, I grew up listening to stories from my mother, who grew up in the North. She read me poems by Robert Service. I was fascinated by the North and stories of the Klondike Gold Rush. To reach the gold fields, most of the prospectors took the route to the ports of Dyea and Skagway in southeast Alaska. Here the Klondikers could follow either the Chilkoot or the White Pass trails to the Yukon River and sail down to the Klondike. The Canadian authorities required each of them to bring a year's supply of food in order to prevent starvation. All in all, the Klondikers' equipment weighed close to a ton. Performing this task and contending with the mountainous terrain and cold climate meant those who persisted did not arrive until the summer of 1898, which was too late. Once there, they found few opportunities, and many of them left disappointed. In July of 2016, I finally fulfilled my dream of hiking the Chilkoot Trail. Mike and I flew from Vancouver to Juneau, Alaska, where we took in the sights. We also went on a raft tour which started at the Mendenhall Glacier. After exploring Juneau, we took the American ferry to Skagway. Majestic mountains rise abruptly on either side of Skagway, a town situated in a narrow glaciated valley at the head of the Dyea Inlet in Alaska. Positioned along one of the main transportation corridors leading to Canada's interior, Skagway was established as a result of the gold strike in the Klondike region of Canada's Yukon territory. Beginning in the summer of 1897, thousands of hopeful stampeders poured into the new town and prepared for the arduous 500-mile journey to the gold fields. Realizing that grueling challenges lay ahead on the route and the economic potential of supplying goods and services to other stampeders, some chose to remain in Skagway and established a permanent community. Although it lasted but a brief period and few obtained the wealth they dreamed of, the Klondike Gold Rush left a lasting mark on the Alaskan and Canadian landscapes. Today, Skagway's boomtown era remains alive in the many turn-of-the-century buildings that survive. The city now hosts 500,000 tourists annually and has a year-round population of approximately 800. After we explored the sights of Skagway some more and attended a mandatory Chilkoot Trail hiker meeting, we decided to hike the trail in 5 nights from Dyea to Bennett. The most popular campsites to stay at on the 5-day hike are the Canyon City, Sheep Camp, Happy Camp, and Lindeman City and Bennett. We were starting to get super excited about the hike, and we spent an evening before in Skagway at our Air BnB getting organized for a hike. Day 1, we hiked from the trailhead to Canyon City, which started in Dyea. The trail started out pretty aggressive and then leveled out through an area called the Beaver Ponds. We had lunch at the Finnegan Point campsite, then the trail followed the Dyea River for a while. We were very happy to get to our campsite at Canyon City. We found a really nice spot along the river to set up our camp. After we rested for a while, we went to the Canyon City ruins. It's 1 kilometer trek each way, but it's on a flat trail and you get to cross the river. We wandered past an old oven, a steam boiler, and remains of an old house. Day 2 was Canyon City to Sheep Camp. It was a pretty nice hike, and it took us about 2 hours to make it to Pleasant Camp, where we had lunch. And this is where we started to meet friends. After about another 2 hours, we reached our destination of Sheep Camp. It took us about another 2 hours to reach Sheep Camp after lunch, for a total of 4 hours to travel 8 kilometers. Sheep Camp has a large shelter full of picnic tables, what makes it for a very nice social and relaxing afternoon and evening with our new made friends. Day 3, Sheep Camp to Happy Camp, which is Summit Day. This is the day that I've been dreaming of for many years. We hit the trail by 6 a.m. as recommended by the rangers. The first half of day 3 is going to be almost all uphill. It wasn't difficult making good time between Sheep Camp and the scales, but after that, your time slows down considerably. There are a lot of interesting artifacts littering the ground along the scales and on the way to the summit. Once you've made it to the scales, it's time to put your trekking poles away. We needed our hands to help scramble up the boulders of the pass. We had to be careful of falling rocks when we were climbing. We did have one rock come tumbling down, which was really quite scary. This was really hard for me because of my short little legs. As we scrambled up, we also had to jump over a crevice to the other side. And this was really hard for me as I was carrying my big heavy pack. Thankfully, Mike had to grab me as I jumped, but it was a really scary moment. Seeing the ranger station and the warming shelter coming up was such a relief. Getting to the summit took us 5.5 hours for the 5.7 kilometer climb. In the shelter, there were postcards to fill out, and they recommended writing one to yourself, and then they mailed it to you a year later. It was very cool to get that postcard a year later. Relaxing at the ranger station was a welcome relief, but little did I know, the next few hours were going almost as tough as the morning. There's more rocks to descend, intermittent with snow patches. It was very hard. It was also very buggy, and this is when I had to break out my mosquito net. It took us about 2.5 hours to reach camp from the summit. It was a 12-kilometer day that took us 8 hours. The ranger said that a good estimate of the time this day will take is the total time it took you to get to the trailhead to Sheep Camp, including breaks. Our total was 9 hours, and we finished summit day in 8 hours. When we woke up on day 4 at Happy Camp, the camp was engulfed in cloud, and we had a late start, taking our time in the morning, knowing it was going to be a shorter day. The trail started out a bit rough, following a very narrow rocco edge along the river. The winds were really high, and the gusts caught our packs and could easily throw our footing off. The trail is difficult footing enough, and the extra obstacle wind made it really tricky to navigate. It's less than a kilometer on this terrain before the trail cuts up to the hill beside you. Eventually the sun poked through the clouds, which made it much warmer. Around the same time, we finally came over the crest of the rocky hillside to Deep Lake and the downhill trail to the campsite at the head of the lake where we planned to have lunch. Between Deep Lake and Lindeman City, it was recommended to travel in groups of 4 or more due to bear activity. This is where we reached an old boat frame on the side of the trail. The continuous slow descent on the flat path made for a quick, easy journey down to Lindeman. This campsite also had an interpretive center tent set up full of pictures and historic information about the trail. They also had board games we could play and a small library of books that could be used for the night and returned before you leave. There was also a stack of certificates that certify you hiked the trail. We took one to write our name on to take it home for our bragging rights. Day 5 was Lindeman City to Bennett. After a brief hike out of camp, the trail begins to climb up rocky and muddy mountainsides. This lasts for about 2.5 kilometers before you finally reach the top and get some great views. We thought this was a good spot for a short break, not realizing that Bear Loon Lake Camp was not much further. Once you pass the cabin, the trail turns into a sandy path. It's almost like walking through a small desert with a forest not far off to the distance. From the cabin to Bennett is about 2.5 kilometers, entirely walking on the sand. It was around 2.5 hours to reach Bennett from Bear Loon Lake. Totaling day 5 was 4.5 hours for 11.3 kilometers. We made it. The sense of accomplishment is a great feeling. We stayed the final night here at Bennett, spending one last night with our new friends before catching the train to Whitehorse the next morning. It was an amazing trail and an amazing experience. We built lifelong friends, lifelong memories, and I couldn't ask for a better trip. The weather was great, the scenery was gorgeous. If anyone is ever thinking about doing this hike, I definitely recommend you do. It was such a sense of accomplishment completing the Chilkoot Trail, and I got to check that one off my bucket list. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moiled for gold. The Arctic trails have secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was the night on the marge of Lake Labarge I cremated Sam McGee.